Evening, welcome to week 5 Intel 300. I hope everyone is getting something out of this class. And for those of you who haven't handed in an assignment for week 4, do so immediately. I'm going to start taking points off now, so there will be points off, but hand it in so I've got it, and you can proceed on with the rest of the class. At this point, you should have a good idea of your paper, a clear thesis statement, a clear, narrow thesis statement, and what we'll be doing now is validating arguments that you have using various research methods. So you have your topic, your thesis, and now we're looking to actually prove or disprove that hypothesis. So in your reading, basically this week covers quantitative and qualitative methods, two research approaches that are pretty universal. Quantitative, as you saw in the lesson plan, uses metrics, data to determine an answer to an intelligence question. So let's say you get the question, you're at CENTCOM, and someone asks, how much opium is being exported out of Afghanistan in 2012? Or how much opium was exported in 2012? It's a pretty relevant question, something that you should answer. So how would you go about doing this? Well, you can't count all of it, obviously. So you'd probably use a sampling, try and figure out a representative sample of the opium population. And you could do this by looking at 100 Afghans and determining that 5% is involved in the opium trade. And of this 5%, one of them produces 100 hectares of opium. 3 of them produce 10 hectares of opium, and the other one produces 1 hectare of opium. And you look at that sample, and you would take that sample out of Helmand province, and then you would multiply that 100 times over to account for all the people in Helmand province. And that's sampling. It works pretty accurately for this. They're actually pretty good, accurate statements about opium. It works great for polls, political polls. If you guys follow the election, that's exactly what they do. They'll take 1,000 people in a political poll, and then they will take from different economic status, different racial and ethnic categories, different geographic locations, and they'll sample that 1,000, and then from there you can same proportions as a cross section of the United States, and you can then multiply and figure out who's people going to vote for. So that's kind of your best quantitative methods, and I'm oversimplifying it, but yeah, the Afghan question about opium is you would use quantitative methods primarily to determine the answer. Qualitative research is more looking at future predictions. So quantitative you would probably use to answer a question right now. Qualitative you would try and answer more of those inference questions, although it's not necessarily always future, but what you're doing is you're generally looking at past problems to predict the future, and that's kind of where qualitative methods come in. Not necessarily numeric, but it's more related to kind of the induction process of intelligence that we talked about last week. So if you're going to ask the question, and this is kind of the ongoing question, unemployment leads to revolution. Unemployment leads to revolution. That's your independent and dependent variable. How would you go ahead and use qualitative methods to answer that question? Well, the first thing most people would do is look at the historical examples. So if I say 10 or 20% unemployment leads to revolution. So you'd ask, well, was that the percentage in Iran? Was Iran 20%? Was that caused the Russian Revolution, that level of unemployment? So you're using history in that sense to predict the future. And that's essentially what qualitative, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but for most qualitative intelligence analysis, they use past examples, historical examples, to try and prove a future prediction. So what I kind of want to leave you with is a particular problem set that's been asking researchers, probably some people in this classroom are curious, and it's and I want to use qualitative and quantitative methods to kind of answer this. So the question is, did the surge in 2007 lead to a decrease in violence in Iraq? Did the surge, again, when we surged troops in Iraq in 2007, lead to the subsequent decrease in violence? So your independent variable is the surge, and that's what a lot of people are saying. And then the dependent variable is decrease in violence that we saw in Iraq. So there's multiple variables that might have led to the decrease, but if you're going to test that thesis, you'd start with quantitative methods. So you first would look at acts of violence against U.S. troops, and you could probably produce a small chart that just shows increase in troops on one side, and then a decrease in violence on the other side, and that is the most simple quantitative model. At this point, you should know that's too simple, that there could be coincidences, there could be correlations or unintended correlations that aren't there, but that's your simple quantitative look at it. Another quantitative method is you would take a sampling of data, and you would look, so instead of looking at Iraq as a whole, you would look at places where we actually surged troops. So, not in Iraq, but in Baghdad, we surged troops in these neighborhoods, and then we saw a decrease in violence. So you have a better sample if you look in more narrow neighborhoods. The other thing is you're going to look at exact time frame. So you would look at increase. This is actually the months where we surged troops, and these are the actual months there was a decrease in violence. And obviously there's going to be a lag time, but quantitative analysts would look at those factors. Other factors, you would take a sampling set of Sunnis, not just Sunnis, but Sunnis from Baghdad, Sunnis from Anbar province, Sunnis from the south of Baghdad, and you would see, when did they turn, or at what point did they turn? And if you had a good sample, then you could say, yes, all Sunnis in the Sunni triangle, or a good portion of them, had turned at the same time we were surging troops. So that gives you kind of that quantitative model, but that of course doesn't give you the answer. The answer is a little bit more detailed than that. These could just be quantitative sample sets that have no relation. So you need to use, in that case, the qualitative methods. And the first thing you probably think of is historical examples. Where were counterinsurgencies similar to Iraq solved by an influx in troops? And you can look at Algeria, you can look at Vietnam, you can look at other historical patterns, and they'll give you a little bit of a answer. But then you need to get down to a little bit to the people, and this is where qualitative methods come in, because then you would do an interview of people. You would actually ask them, why did you switch from being an Al-Qaeda supporter to a Sunni extremist, or a Sunni Sons of Iraq person? Why did you do that? And then you could take a sampling, so using both qualitative and quantitative methods to fuse your answer. Another example, the readings talk about anthropology, tribal studies. Why did the surge, or why did the Sons of Iraq movement spread from Anbar to Baghdad to Mosul to Mahmudiyah in the south? And you would use the qualitative study analysis of the tribes and the family linkages and all those anthropology studies to determine why the surge transferred over. And it might not have been because we had troops in those areas. It might have been because the familial ties, or the tribal ties between all of those different aspects. So the bottom line is, what we're looking for is you have a question like that, a narrow question like, how did the surge cause the decrease in violence? And you can look at quantitative methods that give you part of the picture. You can look at qualitative pictures, give you methods that give you a better picture. But when you combine them, you get a really good sample set. So that kind of is my 10-minute spiel for this topic. If there's any questions or issues, please let me know.